We didn't want to do Second World War. We didn't want to do any war. After the Civil War, we'd seen the elephant. We didn't want to descend into that emotional archaeology, but we're losing 1,000 veterans a day. Our kids think we fought with the Germans against the Russians. It was the other way around. And I just felt there was an urgency. We couldn't have made this film 10 years ago. In 5 years, these guys will be dead. We just lost somebody yesterday who was central in our film. And so we decided to do it from the bottom up. Every single documentary, and there have been thousands of them on the Second World War, are either 101, lots of context, no intimacy, or they're intimate, they drop down to a specific moment, and they lack context. Not a single one covers the European and the Pacific theater and the home front simultaneously. That is to say, as it happened. And all of them are mitigated, are distracted by an interest in generals and politicians who don't do the fighting and dying, in strategy and tactics which abstract what actually goes on, in an obsession with weapons and armaments and guns, and all things Nazi. I mean, you look at the History Channel, it's called the Hitler Channel, and that interest in evil, which everyone understands, sometimes metastasizes into an admiration for the Nazis' superior weaponry and early military successes. I wanted none of it. I wanted a simultaneous European and Pacific theater anchored in the home front, and I wanted to be about what combat was like, what it was really like. We honor these veterans by saying what it was like, and we discovered footage that hadn't been seen since it was exposed, some of it color. We spent years, not months, years deep in the archives around the world, and we decided to focus entirely on the bottom up. No experts, no armchair historians, no Monday morning quarterbacks. If you weren't in this war or in combat or waiting anxiously for someone to come home from it, you're not in our film. And we further limited it. We knew we couldn't tell the whole thing. This is the biggest event that ever took place, human-made. We took 4 geographically distributed American towns: Waterbury, Connecticut, Mobile, Alabama, Sacramento, California, and Laverne, Minnesota. We went to those towns, we found out where people lived, where they ate, the movie palaces where they got the news from the newsreels. We stayed behind and watched some people as they worked and worried and grieved in the face of the struggle, but most of all, followed their sons off to hell. Not the good war that the Second World War has now become in our popular mythologizing, but of course the worst war ever, responsible for the deaths of 60 million human beings. And we just wanted to unwrap the same thing that had smothered the Civil War, that gallant, bloodless myth, and show what it was like to be in battles. It has the most complicated sound effects tracks, and you get to know 25 or 30 battles uncomfortably. Footage that is as obscene as anything, and more important, to be ushered into the lives of 40 people. Just as these 4 towns stand in for all other towns, these 40 people stand in for everyone else. The film was accepted at the Cannes Film Festival. They showed the whole thing, and we went there worried that our provincial American perspective would not. They loved it. They saw it as a universal human story that we wish to tell. And it is, of all the work I've done, the most satisfying, and I think in many ways the most important. And we've just come off the most wildly positive response around the country, and in ratings, in letters, and all of the stuff you want to have happen. Well, the language is a complete red herring. Tom Hanks's film, Steven Spielberg's film, Saving Private Ryan, was on broadcast television with dozens of uses of the F word in prime time, in broadcast television with a waiver, and you could make an argument that because it's fiction, every use of it is gratuitous. In our film, there are 4 words that come up in the course of nearly 15 hours, and they are essential to the theme, and it was a no-brainer. But we live in a media culture in which we are more interested, because of the nature of story, in false conflict. You know, is Britney Spears going to get her kids or not? Is she going to marry this person, or is this person going to get a divorce? This is just mindless story aspects. So that was a non-story. The other more important controversy was that, sight unseen, Hispanic groups decided that because we did not include any Hispanics that we had deliberately excluded them, which was nothing further from the truth. We began each episode with a disclaimer that said the Second World War was fought in thousands of places, too many for anyone accounting. This is the story of 4 American towns and how their citizens experienced that war. We went into these towns, we reached out, we advertised our presence, we reached out to veterans groups of all kinds, and we're not looking for any specific ethnicity. We didn't have any German Americans. They were the hugest immigrant group. We didn't have Irish Americans. They were even bigger. We just focused on whoever came forward. We're looking for a specific combat experience. Hispanics were 1.4% of the population in 1940 census, and not a single one came forward. They were not segregated as African Americans were. They were not interned. And sight unseen, because they are now the largest minority, in a retroactive fashion, exerted pressure on public television and on us in violation of the Broadcast Act of 1967, and more important, the First Amendment of the United States, in which you're allowed to do anything you want to do. There was no exclusion. And they forced us, through threatening underwriters and public television, to add new content. I fortunately was able to avoid interfering with the film that I finished and add on just some sequences. And it's so interesting that the Hispanic veterans that we got to were amazing. They said, first of all, I'm being told I'm Hispanic. I'm a Mexican American, but when I joined the Army, I was an American, which is what we were looking for. Not what made us distinct, but what made us whole. And each one of them described experiences that were in no way speaking to a Hispanic experience, but speaking to an American experience. When a Japanese American in our film breaks down and cries at the 2 dead Germans before him, dead because of his action, he's not crying because he's a Japanese American. He's not crying because he's an American. He's crying because he's a human being. And it is a sad commentary on the state of affairs that, and a disservice, I think, to the Hispanic community, that they argued so vociferously. First, because they didn't look at a single frame of the film, nor asked me to look at it to see the kind of film we'd made. It'd be like complaining to Cezanne that that still life you did that just sold for 130, it didn't have a banana in it. Are you against bananas? No, of course not. It's just whatever fruit was there. We took whatever was there and made a deal with ourselves not to go out and make it all things to all people. So that was the first mistake. But I think by also distinguishing, they show their separation from it, from the American culture and the mainstream of it. And it's very, very sad commentary on what can go on in identity politics. We felt it was the obligation of art to rise above a dialectic you'll never win, to see more, to transcend it, and that's what we did by shooting this additional scenes. And I then had an opportunity to film a scene about a Native American. Native Americans didn't complain at all. That was a story I'd learned way back during the West with Joe Medicine Crow, and we added that. But in no way did it influence the content of the film I finished, and so we feel in the end that it was a positive outcome.